Good Wednesday morning. I'm T.Y. Chang from TYT Investigates. And today we're going to talk about why no green stimulus money. It's my latest article for TYT Investigates. I have to tell you that I enjoyed doing this article a lot because it really addresses a fundamental problem. And you'll see that actually Jonathan put Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as on this. She is certainly a star among progressive Democrats, but she's also for centrist Democrats or moderate Democrats, somebody who is, in their mind, is also a problem. But, obviously we can't blame her. She's one small part of this, but, it might get a lot of attention having some star power with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez there. So I started my article by saying, here's a simple question with a complex answer. And the question is, and it's a complex answer that could kill us all one day. And unfortunately, I'm not exaggerating. Okay. And I say, are you ready? And here's the question. Why is there no stimulus money for the environment from our federal government? Why, after $3 trillion has been authorized for recovery and another $1 trillion is being $1 trillion, so altogether $4 trillion, $1 trillion considered, not one penny has gone to end climate change. This, even though scientists are warning that the Earth is reaching a critical tipping point and we are the world's worst polluter. That's America. Why nothing for the environment when global warming and carbon emissions are increasing faster than previously thought, which surprised a lot of scientists? And why is there not a green stimulus bill even proposed, much less actually being debated, not even proposed, to address climate change and global warming, even though 2019 was the second warmest year on record and 2020 is expected to be the warmest on recent record or ever any record, human record. Now, the simple part of the answer is that Donald Trump is president of the United States and he loves oil companies, especially those who donate to his campaign. And he seems to favor anything that's pro-business, and doesn't matter what it does to the environment. His administration has reversed 100 environmental regulations, many of which have been, or some of which have been set up during the Obama administration. You add to that the Republicans, and in particular Mitch McConnell in the Senate, who has not allowed any environmental bill to be debated or go through or go to committee. And in fact, back in March, a few months ago, he said when the Democrats started to propose different things, including some environmental things, he said, quote, "That is exactly the wrong approach right now." So the question is, why are there no environmental bills being passed? And why are none even being proposed? Why is there no major environmental bill being proposed? And this is where the answer gets complex. The Donald Trump thing is obvious. The Republican thing is obvious. The fossil fuel comes obvious. There's all simple, direct questions of why we have no environmental bill to deal with climate crisis. But why don't we even have a bill proposed? And this is where the answer gets complex. And to some Democrats, it's scary. Now, according to a spokesperson who did not want to be identified from a major environmental organization with lobbyists in Washington, D.C., the reason there's no stimulus money going to the environment to fight climate change is because Democrats are politically afraid that Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, this is what he said, they're afraid that Trump and McConnell will use the Green New Deal as an easy talking point to attack Democrats. Now, the Democratic staffer said, and let me repeat that. So they're saying the reason why there's no bill even being proposed is fear that the Green New Deal will be an easy focus, easy target for Trump and McConnell to attack and say, this is terrible and it's really easy because it's got a quick, catchy name, just like MAGA, Make America Great Again. Green New Deal has a good catchy name, but that also makes it easier to attack, and in some sense. And because it's so almost revolutionary, but certainly most of us, anyone involved with climate change, recognizes it's probably what is going to be needed. That kind of fundamental major overhaul to stop with the climate crisis, to stop it in its tracks, or even just slow it down enough so we can make it. Uh, but because that the Green New Deal is an easy talking point, and that's what this environment said. That's why they haven't proposed a bill. Now, a Democratic staffer who works on climate issues in Congress, who also didn't want to be identified, adds that any environmental legislation would allow President Trump and the Republicans to demonize the Green New Deal. That if you bring up any kind of environmental legislation, he's going to immediately bring up the Green New Deal. And the problem is, he said, a lot of politics today is about scaremongering. What can you say against your opponent as opposed to what you can offer? And the concern is that Trump and the Republicans will be able to demonize the Green New Deal as a major talking point to convince voters in swing states like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, to vote Republican. The demonizations, according to the staffer, would basically be gross exaggerations, where, for example, they might say, claiming the Green New Deal means you won't be able to fly anymore. You won't be able to drive a car anymore or even own a car, which is just not true. So, but those are gross exaggerations and lies. And we know Donald Trump has a chronic habit of lying pretty much thousands of times in his presidency. And so he noted that if the exaggerations work, the Democrats worry Trump will be reelected. And if Trump is reelected, and this is a quote, there will be zero chance of any environmental legislation, end quote. And he said basically for the next 4 years, there won't be any environmental legislation because Trump, and he emphasized this point, that Trump is absolutely anti-environment and pro-fossil fuel. And that is true. Donald Trump has been consistently absolutely pro-business, absolutely pro-fossil fuel, and as a result of that, absolutely against the environment. Although the other day he said he has a great environmental record, which is just nonsense. He actually said, oh, the air is cleaner than it's been in 30 years. Not mentioning it's because of the pandemic around the world, and particularly in the United States, because of his incompetence. You know, the pandemic has shut down the economy. So now a political science professor from Baruch College at City University of New York, Thomas Halper, whom I've interviewed over the years and has always been very accurate. One thing I liked about him is Thomas Halper always seemed to be hit it right on the nose, and his predictions, every single prediction he gave to me over the years has come true. And very, very smart individual, and I just like his record that he's been right on so many political issues. And he said, I'm quoting now, and this is all coming from my article, which you can read at TYT Investigates. Most Democrats believe, with good reason, that supporting the Green New Deal would be fatal, end quote. And he said, and he further went on to say, this is how democracies work. Now, in a way to confirm all this fear, Donald Trump has already started attacking the Green New Deal, even though it's only a resolution, not even a bill, even though there is no actual bill in Congress before the House or the Senate, obviously, but especially the House, which is controlled by Democrats. The House, there is no bill being proposed, no major environmental bill. And even though there is none of that, Donald Trump is attacking the Green New Deal anyway. On June 5th in a news conference, he called the Green New Deal baby talk. And he said that, he basically said that the Green New Deal, and quoting from Donald Trump, President Trump said, the Green New Deal would kill our country. And that is obviously an extreme exaggeration. One could easily argue it will save our country in the world, but certainly nothing in it would kill the country. It would do the opposite, unless he's probably talking about the economy. But ironically enough, the indications are that the sustainable renewable energy jobs are actually be growing faster than the fossil fuel and contribute more to the economy than fossil fuel jobs have. But those are facts, and Donald Trump has shown he doesn't really, one, bother to read about them or study them, and two, he ignores them. So And not only that, in a recent tweet, Mark Lotter, who's director of strategic communications for Trump's presidential campaign, listed the Green New Deal third in alleged Joe Biden hidden agenda or Joe Biden open agenda. And he said the first thing that this Lotter listed was higher taxes, more government regulations, and third, Green New Deal. So they're already attacking the Green New Deal. And what they predicted what the Democrats feared is already happening. So even though it's not, it's only a resolution and there's no major legislation. So, and the anonymously, a number of Democrats, because they know that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is very, very popular, especially among progressive Democrats, especially among the young. She's a star, certainly the most well-known freshman member of Congress. And I would argue that behind Nancy Pelosi, probably the best known member of the House. So in any case, anonymously, they're saying that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because she's one of the sponsors of the Green New Deal, is a lightning rod. And one of the Democrats said anonymously, we don't want the Democratic Party represented by a Democratic socialist from the Bronx. And basically they're arguing that that's too far to the left, too progressive for the middle ground and the swing states where the election will be determined. Although a recent poll indicated that Joe Biden is 13 points ahead of Donald Trump right now, I would point out that everybody thought Hillary Clinton would win in 2016. So you can't be complacent. You really can't trust polls this far away. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and John Kerry are working together on Joe Biden's environmental platform because she's immensely popular, as I said, and they know they cannot attack her or say anything bad about her in public because they would be attacked. But that's what they're saying, that's why we put her picture there, that it's the Green New Deal. Fear of the Green New Deal being an easy talking point to attack Democrats is the reason why we don't have an environmental bill even proposed in the House or in Congress. Now, Professor Halper also added a couple of elephants to this discussion room, adding elephants in the room. He said, quote, I also think that the absence of talk about climate change is largely due to coverage of first the virus and now protests/racism that have monopolized the news. It isn't only climate change that's ignored, everything else is being ignored. And I would add to that, end quote, and add to that, the economy also. And the recession that we're in and the millions who are unemployed. The climate activist organization Greenpeace agrees actually with that part of what Professor Halper said, that the pandemic stopped any federal green legislation. The focus on the pandemic, in other words, by Congress, stopped any discussion of the environmental legislation. But Greenpeace also said stopping a monetary bailout for big oil, the night loans, was an environmental victory. And Greenpeace lobbyist Charlie Jiang, who said on the record, using his name, said November 2020 must be the focus now, saying that, quote, this election is absolutely critical and one of the most, if not the most important election we'll ever see. We're going to need millions of people to turn out to vote to ensure that our next administration or next Congress are going to put the needs of people first. End quote. So the activists and the centrist and moderate Democrats concur that Congress is rightly focused on the pandemic, the recession, the Black Lives Matter, anti-police brutality, mass protests. But, we learned during this pandemic that viruses and science don't pay attention and don't care about your politics. That if you're out there because you believe Donald Trump and you don't want to wear a mask, or if you're out there protesting and not wearing a mask, you're still going to get infected. And it has nothing to do with party lines. And the pandemic has taught us that. And so the same is true with the climate crisis, that no matter what, it's going to happen. And that's what the scientists point out. 99% of the scientists, there's almost nobody that denies the climate now. Even the big oil companies talk about, climate change. So because of that, it's going to happen. The climate crisis is happening and will happen regardless of what we do or don't do. It will just happen faster if we don't do anything. So just as we learned that the science of the virus pandemics ignores national boundaries and political concerns, so too does the science and inevitability of the disaster of hurricanes, drought, wildfires, and climate change. Now, if you think back to March, Nancy Pelosi, Democrat California Speaker of the House, announced in March, several months ago, that the next stimulus bill, she said, we're not going to have a stimulus bill here for the environment, but the next one we will. And back then, the infrastructure plan even had a name, Moving Forward Framework, and it included a lot of things for the environment. It was supported and lobbied for by the Sierra Club, Oil Change International, 350.org, Greenpeace, and the Sunrise Movement. They actually met, and according to sources, communicated with Democratic congressional staff from both the House and the Senate to work on the plan. And they hoped that this would lead to a House bill to include environmentally sustainable industries. And the plan would mean 10 million new jobs and a major shift in American energy policy and pollution, reduction in pollution. Never happened. And then every month they talked about, the next stimulus plan and the next stimulus plan and the next stimulus plan. And now they're not even talking about the next stimulus plan. It's not happening. They're saying that we want to do this, and the real reason behind it is a focus on the November election to make sure Donald Trump is not reelected. But climate activists, not the moderate Democrats, not the centrist Democrats, maybe not even progressive Democrats, but the climate activists believe this is a mistake, not even introducing a bill. The reason they point out is a recent poll says 70% of Americans think climate change is real and needs to be addressed, and 80% of the young Americans, in particular millennials, believe it's real and must be addressed. So the climate activists argue, the same one who said that we don't have a bill because the Democrats are afraid that the Trump and Republicans will make the real Green New Deal a talking point. That same person said it's a mistake not to do it because there's so much of the country, the vast majority believes climate change is real and must be addressed, including Republicans, some Republicans. Actually, many Republicans believe it too, but clearly the vast majority of Democrats, and I think even possibly the majority of Republicans, recognize climate change is real. Now, Keith Gabby, who's the communications director for the 2.5 million member Environmental Defense Fund, responded to an email that I sent out to them. And they had a statement. They said, Congress absolutely needs to invest in rebuilding a better economy, cleaner, healthier, more just. If we just go back to business as usual, and I'm quoting now, we'll be guaranteeing even more serious damage from climate change. Before coronavirus, the clean energy industry produced jobs 70% faster than the economy as a whole. It needs to be a big part of how we recover. The pandemic is a big, giant signal not to ignore the warning of scientists. Congress needs to invest for a healthier, better future. He didn't exactly say there should be a bill, but it seems like he's definitely supporting that. And it's not only environmental activists, it's also corporations. 700 companies, global companies, signed letters to world leaders calling on them to pass economic stimulus packages that tackle both the impacts of the coronavirus and the ongoing climate crisis. 700 global companies, 4,500 health professionals, 350 organizations representing 40 million health workers also urged the leaders of the G20 to ensure a green recovery. The oil industry is also now saying it's time to invest in renewable energy. Even a contributor to the self-described capitalist tool, Forbes magazine, he editorialized it's time to invest in renewable energy sources. And a number of the oil industry publications have said it's time for the fossil fuel industry to start getting into renewable energy. They're recognizing the tide has changed, that even as we speak now, for example, and I've said this many times on these webcasts, 2019 was the first year that renewable energy sources, hydropower, wind, solar, geothermal, actually produced more electricity, about 17.2% for the United States than coal did, which only produced 17.1%. 12 years ago, coal produced 50% of America's electricity. So, the writing's on the wall. Everybody's reading it, except apparently right now, members of Congress. So, and also other economies, other Western economies, Germany and France in particular, are including green parts to their stimulus programs. Germany and France both have subsidies for electric cars, subsidies of $3,000 to $6,000 if their citizens buy electric cars. And here's another point. You don't have to have a Green New Deal to make major change. University of California, Berkeley study found that the US electricity grid could be 90% carbon free if Congress set one rule, universal clean electricity standard. That rule would mandate that utilities must generate part of their energy from carbon-free sources like hydroelectric, wind, solar, and geothermal. That's all. That one rule, that study determined, would knock out 90% of the carbon that we're producing in America. Now, Stand.Earth, which is another climate activist organization, Matt Crow is the director for U.S. oil and gas, the U.S. oil and gas campaign. He said, "We hope congressional leaders come to understand that the overlapping issues of COVID-19 climate, and air pollution all point to a clear conclusion. Using stimulus money to get off fossil fuels would mean better air quality, shovel-ready jobs, healthier homes, and a society more ready to tackle climate change. Done right, greening the stimulus could mean a win for everybody." Now, there is one climate organization that I guess is openly campaigning, is actually conducting a campaign, not open, I should have said, is actively campaigning for a green stimulus bill. And that's Evergreen Action. Now, Evergreen Action is the group of individuals who were on the staff of Governor Jay Inslee of Washington State when he was running for president on an environmental platform. This is his environmental group. And that group formed their own organization in order to tackle climate change. It's called Evergreen Action. They sent out an email thanking 57 members of Congress who wrote to their leadership, Pelosi, Connell, et cetera, to take action on climate change. And now he's asking for the public's help. This is Jamal Rad, who's a part of, who's the co-founder and I think executive director, or campaign director of Evergreen Action. He's asking the public's help for the two big relief packages passed by the House so far, the CARES Act and the HEROES Act, passed by the House, not yet signed. The HEROES Act is not yet signed into law, failed to recognize the urgency of addressing the climate crisis. Massive as they were, and I'm now quoting from him, neither package provided support for clean energy, a sector that shed some 600,000 jobs the first 2 months of the pandemic alone. Let me say that again. The energy sector lost 600,000 jobs. That's more than was lost in the fossil fuel industry. There's all talk about the loss of jobs in the fossil fuel industry, which is bad, but the hope is they can transition. But the renewable energy actually lost more jobs faster. But now, quoting again from Evergreen Actions, but now we're seeing newfound energy among Democrats to prioritize clean energy investment. Data for Progress polling shows strong public support for the ideas of a clean Just Start plan. They have a plan. It's a $1.5 trillion investment in the clean energy economy. So that's $1.5 trillion. The Green New Deal ultimately calls for $16 trillion. So the 1.5 trillion, is 1/10, less than 1/10 as much. And certainly if we're going to spend, ultimately, if HEROES Act becomes law, spend $4 trillion, at least a portion of that, even if it's not 1.5 trillion, something should be spent because nothing is being spent, not a penny so far. Unfortunately, the United States is not alone in focusing on its economy and ignoring the environment. China is also doing the same thing, restarting some coal factories. India is doing the same, and Brazil is doing the same thing. And they're all focused on economic recovery with little regard to the environmental change. One thing everybody agrees on, and that's this, at least not everybody, but certainly all the environmental activists and all the Democrats, and that is for the environment to have any chance at all, as for any chance of climate change, Donald Trump cannot be president of the United States. And not only that, both the House must, be maintained with the Democratic majority, and the Senate has to be flipped so that you have a Democratic president, House, and Senate for something actually be done. And the Democratic staffer said to me, that's when you'll see the horse trading the quid pro quo that I had talked about in earlier pieces, where although some of it hasn't happened on one end, fossil fuel has gotten the ability to get loans from the Fed, but we haven't seen a lot for the environment yet. We haven't seen any bills. But he said that's when you will see horse trading, and that you will see even Republicans coming around, as if Donald Trump is no longer president and the House and the Senate are controlled. And one thing to point out, the UN has said that if we don't meet the goals to reduce carbon in the atmosphere by 2030 and ultimately 2050, if we don't meet the 2050 goals, many scientists believe the human race faces extinction, kind of like the dodo bird, the bird that became extinct because it was too stupid to run away from humans that were chasing it and eating it and killing them and eating them. So if we don't want to go the way of the dodo bird and be that stupid, maybe it's time to recognize that we have to focus on the environment and climate crisis. So I'm going to start reading this. One thing I would love for you to talk about in the chat is that, I've noticed that when I do these kind of stories, they don't get a lot of retweeting or replaying. It's on my Twitter account at TYChang, TIHUACHANG. And I noticed that these stories that to me are really, really important and fundamental. And because they're fundamental, it's addressing a major, obvious question. I've noticed that people don't retweet them and they don't seem to read them as much. And I'm wondering if they're just too long, or should I just do a quick version first and have a long version later so that people will actually read it. So let me get reading some. Gira Brown says the Athenians came close with popular voting on issues, but except for a few referenda, we've not done that yet. Riley Kiwil says, shout out dodo birds. Carl Jones says, I don't do Twitter. Okay, but you can go to TYT Investigates and click on the story, why no green stimulus money, and then share it with all your friends on emails. I think this is a fundamental question that's the very heart of climate crisis, and I hope that people, really put it out there because it is so important. I mean, it's fundamentally important. And I think if a lot of people, for example, if become part of that Evergreen Action campaign, and they have a website, you can just look up Evergreen Action. If you become part of that campaign to push Congress to introduce a bill, then that's, just like the mass demonstrations have actually led to reform on police departments, especially in terms of the killing of African-American men. I think mass demonstrations for the climate, not mass demonstrations because I don't want people to get the virus, because so many more states that open up are getting a spike, sometimes even the highest infection rate they've ever had. At least something online or something, emails and calls and letters to Congress saying that, listen, it's time to do something. And who knows, maybe even the Republicans would do something because they're clearly afraid of mass movements. So, or take them into consideration. And let's see. Oh, Carl Jones says, what does he mean? Meaning me, go to TYT Investigates. Where do you go exactly? I'm a tech idiot. If you, Carl, go online and Google TYT Investigates with a space, you'll go to our website, and I'm assuming, and then you can just look up these articles, and this will be at the top right now because it's the most recent one. So, Imperator 1 says, I prefer Facebook, but I'm concerned about the bubble creation of social media. Okay, well, you can go to Facebook. I also put this on my Facebook account, which is also TY Chang. And I put it on my, let's see, I put it on Twitter, I put it on Facebook, I put it on Instagram, I email people. And I think it's so important because I enjoyed working on this article because it really addresses the fundamental question, one of the fundamental questions of climate change. So, and that is why we, as the world's worst polluter, have nothing in our stimulus recovery for the climate change. And if we don't realize that we've got to answer and deal with the climate crisis, that we are reaching clearly a tipping point, a point of no return. And I want my kids to be able in 2050 to still have an Earth. There is no Earth B. Despite what we see on Star Trek, nobody's going anywhere near any other planets for a long, long time. At least until we discover dilithium crystals or something, or the equivalent thereof. Okay, Carson, there's an actual website, yes. Okay, and Squad Plus One says, this has only been an issue for 70 years. We haven't got till 2050. Yes, we don't have those then. And so Evergreen Action has got an active campaign to try and push Congress. Of course, some moderate Democrats believe, wait until November, so that we can get Donald Trump out of office because the environment has no chance otherwise. So, but that's your decision to make. Imperator One says, dude, someone needs to get us to Alpha Centauri. But what if the people who get us to Alpha Centauri are fossil fuel companies? And what will they do to that planet? So anyway, Carl Jones says, T.Y., can you read my super hat so it can be part of the video? I think there is an opportunity with the current mass mobilization of the political climate. Okay. Carl Riley Quill says, we're all tweeting during the main show on the hashtag Tamara. I thought that page only had videos, T.Y. I promised to look. Oh, no, yes. TYT Investigates is all about basically print articles, digital. It's all digital print. I went from being a TV reporter basically to being a print reporter. And what I found is that being a digital / print reporter, other than these videos notwithstanding, is basically more reporting, more writing, less makeup, and less impact, because a lot more people will watch it. The short, brief video will catch attention. My daughter even said to me, that when she does her homework, she looks, and there are assignments for reading, she looks at whichever is the shortest and she picks that. So that's the I guess it's always been something people going for sure, but now it's in particular like TikTok, which kids love, lasts, I think, for like 5 or 10 seconds. And then you go to the next one, they go to the next one, the next one. The attention span seems to be getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Michael Guy says the sun is the power source and always has been. The current state of solar is a joke. And that is why people take it as a joke. Just look at a Tesla car. They are an extension cord hanging. Yes, right now, that's true. But renewable, sustainable energy is not just solar. That's actually the third on the list. First is hydroelectric, then wind, and then much less so solar. But one thing about solar that's happening is that with the new technology, a couple of things have already happened. Number one, solar panels are now 99% cheaper than they were just 20 years ago. And number two, they're also more efficient. The efficiency rating now is 20%. And they are developing and working on a new solar panel that's 35 to 40% more efficient, both because of its content and because it's two-sided. So that if you put it underneath a white base, the sunlight hits the top part, and because it's clear, it goes through the panels and hits the white and bounces off, and the efficiency rating, if they are able to perfect it, would go up to 35 to 40%, which would make solar panels a lot more useful. But that is true that, right now it's hydroelectric, number one in the US, hydroelectric and wind. I live in New York State. In New York State, it's 99% wind and 1% solar. So, but you can't assume that it will stay static, because it is not. If you put a lot of money into it, research and development, then the technology will definitely improve. And also, one of the benefits of capitalism is when you mass produce things, they become much cheaper. So, and that's something to think about as well. To read Carl Jones' message, please. Okay. How are things in Denmark? People, wait, where's Carl's message? Let me go back to Carl's message here. Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going back. I did read it. I read the thing about, can you read my super hat so it can be part of the video? I think there is an opportunity with the current mass mobilization of the political climate. I did read that already. Is there another one? Let me keep looking for Carl. He's making fun of his two thumbs. And his super chat. Where's your super chat? What's a super chat? I'm going all the way back now to look for a super chat. Carl, do me a favor. Repost your super chat and I will look for it and read it. I'll keep reading in the meantime, but Tamara said, just a step back from the worst president in our history. D. Scully said, nothing will fundamentally change. Biden is not going to help anyone with anything unless they are rich and powerful. He will do what Dems do, that is work with Republicans to implement right policies. I don't agree with that, but certainly I understand what you're saying, because when Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez proposed their Green New Deal, it cost $16 trillion, which I think is, much closer to what is actually needed. And Joe Biden's plan was about less than 1/10, about 1 trillion or so. So you could argue certainly his is not going to be anywhere near as good as what the Green New Deal is. But on the other hand, keep going this way, like off where you can't even see it, and that's where Donald Trump is. He's actually the negative. Zero chance of any environmental change. 4 more years of pro-fossil fuel, 4 more years of anti-environment, 4 more years of bringing things backwards. So even if Joe Biden is only a little bit of plus in your mind, that's better than somebody who's a huge negative. So you've got Trump as a huge negative, Biden is a small positive, and then Bernie as the correct large positive. If that's what you believe, you still have with Donald Trump an immensely negative, anti-environment, pro-fossil fuel, clearly pro-business and to the detriment. And that's something you have to think about if you're going to be realistic about the country. The reality is, with the way the country is now, with how people think, do you want somebody who's actually going to bring it more back, bring us back? He said, make America great again. Well, that means to me, he loved the 50s and 60s. Well, the 50s and 60s is when in the United States, pollution was so bad that you look out your window and you could barely see the buildings 10 blocks away. And the rivers were literally polluted with garbage and feces. And the Cuyahoga River in Ohio actually caught fire. It had so much pollution in it. So that's what Donald Trump could bring us back to. So that's something to think about. That's my personal opinion. So Carl Jones, have you posted? I wish I could copy and paste it. Yeah, why can't you copy and paste it? Okay, I'm going to go back, Carl, and try and find, since everybody wants me to read it, I'm looking for you. I don't see anything really. I'm going all the way back. I already read Carl. Okay, I'm going back all the way back. Oh, here it is. I got it. Carl Jones. When talking to BLM, meaning Black Lives Matter activists, and I guess I don't have to do this to us. When talking to Black Lives Matter activists, it doesn't hurt to mention that environmental racism is a very real thing. I just try to do it without coming across like I am co-opting their movement. Love you, TY. Oh, that's nice. Well, I'm glad I read it. And thank you for donating, Carl Jones. And I think that this is actually very important. Every major environmental organization that I have seen and have been following has said that they support the Black Lives Matter movement against police brutality, and that they consider that environmental activism and environmental racism have to, and opposing environmental racism have to go together. And we have a clear example of that, because during the pandemic, as I mentioned many times in these webcasts, that during the pandemic, it became clear that the infection rate among communities of color were higher and the death rate was higher because the health wasn't as good, because those communities tend to be in more polluted areas. They're next to the factories making things, they're next to the garbage dumps, they're next to the trash, whatever's, and recycling, whatever, not recycling, but the places, they're next to more pollution. And so that we found that, for example, in Chicago, the death rate among African Americans in the Chicago area is, I think, if I remember correctly, almost triple was that of white Americans. So I think that is an important point. And I think most of the environmental organizations recognize that for too long, the environmental movement has been a white movement. And so, and white and some Asians and just a scattering of people of color, but mainly white, and that's a good thing that they did it. I am not somebody. I don't want to get on this thing of attacking anybody. To me, in the Black Lives Matter movement, the thing that I saw in the demonstrations in New York that was wonderful was that there were people of all colors, especially the young people, all ages too, but mainly young, and there were large numbers of Black, white, Asian, Latino, and that to me was so good, because if you want to have an effective united front, you don't start then being picky and breaking apart and saying, oh, we're better than you, we're more correct. And I don't want to use that word, but we are more attacked than you. That may be true. And you can do it on an individual basis on action, but I don't want to attack, for example, white people who are helping the Black Lives Movement. I don't think you should attack anybody, because as a practical matter, the more united you are, the more impact that you have, the more people will stay in the movement and stuff. And ultimately the mass movement, a peaceful mass movement in the long run, I believe, has a much more lasting effect and does less damage, not only in terms of any kind of riot and looting, not even that, just in terms of the relations of people in this country, and less damage and less to the divide of the country. So I did get to read Carl Jones, and thank you to Tamara to make it. I just didn't go far back enough on, oops. And let me just, I'm going to try and get toward the end now. Jared Brown says, the squad plus one, now he's talking our language. Carl Jones, yes. Wait. Okay, let's go back up. I'm going to read several of these. Weena Jensen, hooray, whoopee, mission accomplished. Go, Carl, go, Carl. Tamara said, I've started watching on my laptop when I can for that reason, Carl. Sadly, my internet connection isn't great, so it can mess up the stream. No way to win. Carl just says, laughing out loud, laughing out loud. Yes, I don't know if I have laughed harder before. God, I love him in this group. Oh, thank you very much, Carl. And then I love you guys too. And Weena Jones, Carl Jones, Pulitzer Prize coming your way, meaning prize. Yes, Carl Jones says, this is a great point. We do this a lot on the left. There is a term, purity testing. Ah, I like that. I'm going to use that, Carl. And I will credit you with that if I do that in print. Purity testing. But I saw that in the 60s and 70s, and I saw how, it became a fad, kind of like of what they called, liberal white bashing, self-flagellation. And it became a fad and it disappeared. And then some of the white people also disappeared. And it just doesn't work. And right now, what we need to do is have more unity, not only for this Black Lives Movement, but for the country as a whole. I think we need to do that, and then to move forward. And we have to do that because, as I said earlier, the climate change is not going away. It's going to happen no matter what we do and what we don't do. The only thing is we don't do it, it'll just happen faster. Jerry Brown, now he's on our language. Carl Jones, you're on a roll today. Yes, blushing so hard. Well, thank you, Carl. So I read some chats, and if you can, please go to TYTI Investigates and just Google it, and you'll see it. It's a website. All the articles are on there. And then, Jonathan Larson's articles are there too, his exclusive reports, my exclusive reports. And I actually think that this article is worth reading. If you can't read the whole thing, because I know it's long, it's like 4 pages, at least read the first 4 pages. At least read the first page up to past the part about what the Democratic staffer says the complex answer is about why they're afraid to put out a bill. I think that's very important. And so, if I may, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. And Carl Jones, yes, you are a celebrity, and we are all a celebrity. So, and but by the way, being a celebrity is real celebrities. You know, they can't even go out to dinner. And I'll tell you that the real celebrities I've known, you know, they put on hats and glasses just so they can be a normal person and go to dinner or take a walk and not have people, you know, go all over them. You know, it becomes, you know, your greatest wish becomes your worst nightmare, because all they want after they become actually celebrities is just to have some privacy. So, in any case, I'm T.Y. Chang. This is TYT Investigates. I will be back Friday. Jonathan Larson will be here tomorrow at 11:30. Have a great day. Be safe and be well.